Jackie Chan sat alone in a hotel room in Los Angeles, staring at a plane ticket back to Hong Kong. It was 1985. He'd just finished watching a rough cut of The Protector, the film that was supposed to make him a star in America, and what he saw on that screen wasn't him. It wasn't his style, wasn't his voice, wasn't the person he'd spent 20 years becoming. The producers were happy. The studio was happy. Everyone told him this was exactly what American audiences wanted. And sitting there in that quiet room, Jackie realized he had a choice to make. Pretend to be someone else and maybe succeed, or go home and stay true to everything he believed in, even if it meant never making it in Hollywood. He picked up the ticket, he looked at the date, and for the first time in his career, Jackie Chan seriously considered quitting America forever. To understand why that moment mattered, you need to understand what Jackie had already sacrificed to get there. By 1985, Jackie Chan was 31 years old and already a legend in Hong Kong. He wasn't just famous, he was a cultural phenomenon. His films broke box office records, his stunts defied logic. He'd created a completely unique style of action cinema that blended kung fu with physical comedy, danger with charm, precision with chaos. Movies like Snake in the Eagle's Shadow, Drunken Master, and Project A had turned him into the biggest star in Asia. But Jackie had always dreamed bigger. He'd grown up watching American films, idolizing Gene Kelly and Buster Keaton, studying the way they moved, the way they made audiences feel. He loved Hong Kong, but part of him wanted to prove he could make it anywhere. He wanted to show that his style of filmmaking could work in the West, that audiences everywhere would respond to honesty and effort and real physical risk. So when Hollywood came calling in the early 80s, Jackie said yes, even though everyone around him warned it might not work. His first attempt was a film called The Big Brawl in 1980. It was produced by Raymond Chow and directed by Robert Klaus, the same man who directed Enter the Dragon with Bruce Lee. On paper, it made sense. Jackie would bring his acrobatic fighting style, Hollywood would provide the budget and distribution, and together they'd create something special. But from the beginning, there was a fundamental misunderstanding about who Jackie was and what made him work. The American producers saw him as the next Bruce Lee, a tough, serious martial artist who could carry a gritty action film. But Jackie wasn't Bruce Lee. He'd never wanted to be. Bruce was intensity and power, a fighter who moved like a weapon. Jackie was different. He was playful. He made the audience laugh even while he was getting hurt. His characters were underdogs, regular people who won through creativity and persistence, not because they were the strongest. The violence in his films was never about dominance. It was about survival, ingenuity, watching someone use a ladder or a folding chair or whatever was nearby to get out of an impossible situation. That vulnerability, that willingness to look scared or silly or hurt, was what made audiences love him. But Hollywood didn't understand that. They looked at Jackie and saw only his physical skills, not the heart underneath them. The Big Brawl tried to turn Jackie into a conventional tough guy. The director wanted him to be more serious, more stoic. The fights were choreographed by American stunt coordinators who didn't understand Jackie's rhythm, the way he built comedy into action, the timing that made everything work. Jackie tried to explain. He'd spent years developing his approach, training under Master Yu Jim Yuen at the China Drama Academy, a brutal Peking opera school where children learn discipline through pain and repetition. He knew how action should feel, how to make a punch look real, how to construct a fight scene so it told a story. But on The Big Brawl, his input was politely ignored. The film came out, flopped at the box office, and Jackie returned to Hong Kong disappointed but not defeated. He figured maybe it was just the wrong project, the wrong director. Maybe next time would be different. 5 years later, he got another chance. The Protector was going to be his big American break. Bigger budget, a director named James Glickenhaus, who'd made successful action films, a story set in New York City with Jackie playing a cop. Something closer to the police story character that had worked so well in Hong Kong. Jackie arrived optimistic. He brought his own stunt team from Hong Kong, thinking this time they'd let him do things his way. And for a while it seemed like it might work. But slowly, the same problems emerged. The director had a very specific vision for what an American action movie should be. and it didn't align with Jackie's instincts. Glickenhaus wanted the film darker, grittier, more violent. He wanted gunfights and explosions, wanted Jackie to shoot people without hesitation, wanted a tone that felt closer to Dirty Harry than Drunken Master. Jackie pushed back. He explained that his characters didn't kill casually, that the action needed moments of humor to balance the tension, that the audience needed to see him struggle and get hurt so they'd care when he won. The director listened, then ignored him. They shot the film the Hollywood way. There were other problems too, things that felt like small humiliations, but added up. The script had Jackie's character speaking in ways that didn't feel natural, stiff dialogue that didn't match how he actually talked. In Hong Kong, Jackie was deeply involved in every aspect of his films. He'd rewrite scenes on set, adjust the choreography mid-shoot, work with his team until everything felt right. But here, he was just an actor. He'd show up, do what was asked, then go back to his trailer. The stunt coordinators were professionals, but they didn't understand his philosophy. In Hong Kong, Jackie's stunts were designed to be dangerous but controlled. He took real risks, but everything was calculated, rehearsed dozens of times. The American team wanted to use more wires, more camera tricks, more editing to create the illusion of danger without the actual risk. Jackie tried to explain that the audience could tell the difference, that the reason his Hong Kong films worked was because people knew it was really him doing really dangerous things. But insurance companies and studio lawyers had final say, and they said no. Too much liability, too much risk. Use the doubles, use the wires. Make it look good in post-production. The final product was everything Jackie feared. The Protector came out in 1985, and when Jackie finally saw it in a screening room, he felt sick. The action was competent but soulless. The humor he'd tried to inject had been cut. The character didn't feel like him. It felt like an imitation of American action heroes, all swagger and violence with none of the heart. The film was rated R, full of graphic violence and profanity, things Jackie had always avoided because he wanted families to watch his movies together, wanted kids to see that you didn't need to be mean or cruel to be a hero. He'd made a career out of being likable, relatable, someone audiences rooted for because he seemed like he could be their friend. But the person on screen in The Protector was cold, distant, and worst of all, forgettable. The studio was pleased. They thought they'd made a solid American action movie with an exotic foreign star. They were already talking about sequels, about Jackie's future in Hollywood. But Jackie sat in that screening room feeling like he'd betrayed himself. That night in the hotel room was when it all came to a head. Jackie had the plane ticket. He had his passport. He could leave, go back to Hong Kong, keep making the films he wanted to make, stop trying to please people who didn't understand what made him special. And the more he thought about it, the more it made sense. He was already successful. He didn't need Hollywood. Hong Kong loved him. Asia loved him. He could live very comfortably, making films for audiences who appreciated his work. Why keep fighting for acceptance from an industry that wanted to change everything about him? Why compromise his principles for people who saw him as just another action star, interchangeable with any other martial artist who could throw a kick? He held that ticket for a long time, turning it over in his hands, thinking about everything he'd sacrificed to get here. The injuries, the homesickness, the constant feeling of being misunderstood. And he thought about what would happen if he left. Would anyone care? Would Hollywood even notice? Or would they just find someone else, another martial artist willing to play by their rules? But then something shifted. Jackie started thinking about why he'd wanted to come to Hollywood in the first place. It wasn't just about fame or money. He already had those. It was about proving something deeper. It was about showing that his way of making films, his philosophy of action and comedy and honesty could work anywhere. That audiences everywhere, regardless of language or culture, would respond to someone putting their real self on screen. If he left now, he'd always wonder. He'd always think maybe he just hadn't tried hard enough, hadn't been good enough, and more than that, if he left, he'd be accepting Hollywood's premise, that to succeed in America, you had to become something you weren't. That authenticity was less important than fitting a mold, and Jackie realized he couldn't accept that, not because he was stubborn or arrogant, but because everything he'd built was based on the opposite belief. He'd built his career by being himself, by refusing to be the next Bruce Lee or the next anyone, by insisting that his way was valid even when people said it wouldn't work. If he compromised now, what would that say about everything he'd done before? So Jackie made a decision. He wouldn't quit Hollywood, but he also wouldn't keep trying to succeed on Hollywood's terms. He would go back to Hong Kong, yes, but only temporarily. He would make more films his way, prove that his approach still worked, build his reputation even higher. And then when the opportunity came again, he would return to America. But next time, he wouldn't ask for permission to be himself. He would show them what he could do, and they could either accept it or not. It was a gamble. There was no guarantee Hollywood would give him another chance, but at least he'd be able to look at himself in the mirror. Jackie flew back to Hong Kong the next day. He didn't make a big announcement about leaving Hollywood. He just quietly returned to work. Over the next few years, he made some of the best films of his career: Police Story, Armor of God, Project Apart 2. Films where he had complete creative control, where he could take the risks he wanted, where every frame reflected his vision. In Police Story, he slid down a pole wrapped in live electrical lights and shattered multiple lights on the way down, got burned and cut, kept filming. He crashed through a sugar glass wall in a way that left him with permanent hearing damage in one ear. He hung from a speeding bus, jumped from building to building, choreographed fights that felt like controlled chaos, and audiences loved it. The films made massive amounts of money. Jackie's reputation grew even larger. He became not just a star, but a filmmaker, someone whose name meant quality and commitment. Hollywood watched from a distance, and slowly, their perception began to change. By the early 90s, American audiences were starting to discover Jackie's Hong Kong films through word of mouth and imported VHS tapes. People would watch Police Story or Drunken Master 2 and realize they'd never seen anything like it. The action was different, more creative, more visceral, more human. And those end credits, where Jackie showed the outtakes of stunts gone wrong, of him getting hurt and getting back up, revealed something Hollywood action films never did: the real cost of what they were watching. It created a connection, a respect. Viewers understood that this wasn't just entertainment, this was dedication, and that authenticity was exactly what Jackie had been trying to preserve. In 1995, Jackie got another call from Hollywood. New Line Cinema wanted him for Rumble in the Bronx. But this time the conversation was different. The producers had seen his Hong Kong work. They understood that Jackie's style was the selling point, not something to be changed. They offered him more creative control, agreed to let him work with his own stunt team, promised they wouldn't try to turn him into a typical American action hero. Jackie was skeptical. He'd heard promises before, but he also sensed that something had shifted. Hollywood was finally willing to meet him halfway, so he said yes with conditions. He would do his own stunts, he would choreograph his own fights, he would have input on the tone, and if they tried to change him, he'd walk. The producers agreed. Rumble in the Bronx wasn't perfect. It was still a compromise in some ways. Shot in Vancouver pretending to be New York, dialogue dubbed into English, stories simplified for Western audiences. But the action was pure Jackie. When he broke his ankle jumping from a bridge to a hovercraft, he didn't stop filming. He wrapped it in a special sock painted to look like a sneaker and kept working. The producers were shocked, but they didn't force him to use a double. They trusted him. And when the film came out in 1996, it was a genuine hit, making over $30 million in North America and introducing Jackie to a whole new audience. Critics noticed something different about it. The action felt alive, physical, real. And those end credits, showing Jackie's injuries and mishaps, became the film's signature. Audiences stayed in their seats, laughing and wincing, understanding for the first time what made Jackie Chan special. Rush Hour followed in 1998, pairing Jackie with Chris Tucker in a buddy cop comedy that became a massive success, earning over $240 million worldwide. And this time, Hollywood didn't try to change Jackie. They built the film around his strengths, his physical comedy, his timing, his charm. They let him be vulnerable and funny and scared, all the things that made his Hong Kong films work. The success validated everything Jackie had believed. He'd been right to refuse to compromise. He'd been right to trust that audiences would respond to authenticity. And he'd been right to walk away when Hollywood wanted to turn him into someone else. Because walking away gave him the strength to come back on his own terms. Over the next 2 decades, Jackie became one of the biggest stars in the world. He made films in Hollywood and Hong Kong, always maintaining his principles, always doing his own stunts, always showing the outtakes, always treating the audience with respect. He broke more bones, took more risks, and never pretended to be invincible. And audiences everywhere loved him for it, not because he was the toughest or the strongest, but because he was real. Looking back at that night in 1985, at Jackie sitting alone with a plane ticket, the moment feels almost inevitable. It was the low point that made everything after possible. Because if he'd stayed, if he'd kept making films the way Hollywood wanted, he might have had some success. He might have become a steady working actor in American action movies. But he never would have become Jackie Chan. He would have been a version of himself, sanded down and reshaped, stripped of everything that made him unique. And the world would have lost something irreplaceable. Not just an action star, but an artist who proved that staying true to yourself, even when it's difficult, even when everyone's telling you to change, is the only way to create something that lasts. Jackie didn't quit Hollywood that night, but he quit trying to be what Hollywood wanted him to be. And that refusal, that quiet moment of choosing himself over success, ended up being the very thing that made him successful. Because respect isn't given to people who conform. It's earned by people who have the courage to say, this is who I am, and if that's not enough, I'll find somewhere it is. Jackie found that place. But first, he had to be willing to walk away from everything to protect it. And that willingness, more than any stunt or fight scene, is what made him a legend.